And as I explained at the beginning,
it's just human beings when they get to a position of any kind of authority, any sort of a position of respect and prestige. They want to protect that at all costs, and they want to keep everyone down who they think is getting unwarranted attention above them, like yourself.
But given the fundamental landscape that we live in, as I mentioned at the beginning, we live for a short time, we're not at the center of the universe,
Right.
We arrived late to cosmic history. We just arrived in the last few million years out of a 13.8 billion years history.
Right.
The cosmic play is not about us. If you arrive late to the play, at the end of the play, you are not at the center of stage, it's not about you, okay? And our responsibility needs to be, to find other actors that were around for much longer because they know what the play is about.
Yes.
And
let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Have you seen any compelling information, any data that leads you to believe that we have been visited?
The only data I'm aware of that is worth attending to is the anomalies of Oumuamua, of 3I Atlas, which are very different anomalies.
Right.
And there was also a meteor that I discovered with my former undergraduate student, Amir Siraj, a meteor that was identified by US government satellites back in 2014. And it was moving so fast that it definitely came from outside the solar system. And my colleagues were very concerned, and they said, we don't believe the US government. So maybe Jamie can show us. I said, okay, at the time I was chairing the board on physics and astronomy of the National Academies.
Why didn't they believe the U.S. government about this?
Because all the previous meteors they thought must have been from the solar system, and therefore, and the U.S. government also makes mistakes every now and then, they
So
said.
the U.S. government, what department was observing
This is the Space Force, the U.S. Space Command. So what I did is at dinner.
What year was this?
This was around 2020.
Okay.
And I expressed my frustration at dinner with as chair of the board on physics and astronomy of the National Academies. And there was a member there from Los Alamos National Laboratory, and he said, let me help you. We managed to reach out to the U.S. Space Command through the White House at the time, and we got an official letter from the U.S. Space Command saying, we looked at the data, and we can verify the 99.999% that this object, this meteor, which was roughly half a meter in size, came from outside the solar system. That's what they said. At that point, I decided to lead an expedition to the Pacific Ocean, where the explosion was identified from the fireball. There was a huge amount of light. To go there and search for the materials from that object because it was moving fast. It was moving at 60 kilometers per second relative to the solar system, very similar to 3I Atlas. So it was fast. And moreover, the object maintained its integrity down to the lower atmosphere. It didn't explode until it got within 20 kilometers of the surface of the ocean. So it must have been extremely tough, much tougher than all the previous meteors catalogued by NASA. Okay, so I can show you some images from that trip to the Pacific Ocean. Actually, it was documented by Netflix, and there will be a documentary coming out within a year, next year, 2026. This was the team of researchers that came with me on the deck of the ship, and we collected materials with a magnetic sled. This is a sled with magnets on top of it. You can see the Netflix team at the lower left here. And then I brought the materials in this suitcase that you see here. I shipped it by FedEx to my home. This was a $1.5 million expedition. So
why would you ship it by FedEx? Why wouldn't you just carry it with you?
Because I was worried that somewhere in the airport they would say, no, we have to confiscate that.
But don't they know who you are? Can't you get somebody to call in?
I don't want to take any risk.
So it's just a bunch of metal?
No,
what did you
here
find?
you can see the material. So it's mostly sand from the bottom of the ocean, 2 kilometers deep, 1 mile or so, a little more than a mile. And then I found these, we found these molten droplets, you see, that are very distinct relative to grains of sand. And we isolated them. I had you can go to you can see here these molten droplets, and it turns out that 10% of them did not have the composition of materials from the solar system. And so we studied them in the laboratory of my colleague at Harvard, Stein Jacobson. And I had a summer intern, Sophie Bergstrom, that found 850 of those molten droplets that allowed us to do the analysis. How did my colleagues respond to that? They said, oh, he went to the wrong place because there was a seismic signal that could have been misidentified and could have been a truck passing nearby. And so a reporter from the New York Times said, oh, they went to the wrong place because it was not a meteor, it was a truck. And I wrote to the reporter and I said, how irresponsible are you? You didn't even ask me. The data that led us to this place was based on the fireball, on the light that was detected by US government satellites. And the US Space Command confirmed the location. It was not based on the seismic detection of the signal. We just looked and found this.
So
seismic.
It seems like your colleagues are contacting the New York Times to try to dismiss you.
I wrote to the editor at the time and said, look, if this is what you write about science, how can we trust what you write about politics?
Right. Yeah. So these objects, these very small molten droplets,
right.
What did you determine from them?
We found that 10% of them had a chemical composition different than solar system materials that were found before. And again, my colleagues, some of them, said, oh, they found coal ash, the burnt material from coal. So we said, okay, well, let's check. We identified 61 elements from the periodic table and showed that it's definitely not coal ash. And then they said, it's something else from the crust of the earth. We checked that. It's not from the crust of the earth. It's an endless battle to basically, they can throw mud without having access to the material.
But I don't understand. This is a known meteorite. It hit Earth. You collected pieces of material from the scene where it hit.
Right.
And they still want to dismiss it.
Yeah, they say the government cannot be trusted. They raise a lot of dust. If you raise a lot of dust, you can say, I don't see anything.
Well, you get the New York Times involved, too, which is even stupider.
Well,
that's so crazy that the
New
York
York Times
jumped in without contacting
But this is the landscape I have to operate in. And the one thread through this landscape is that common sense is not common.
Right. Well, it seems more than that. It seems like a coordinated attack. It seems like a bunch of people have a personal vendetta.
Yes.
Which is probably based on some petty jealousy. And also, they just don't like people stepping ahead of them.
I told my students in the class, I said, on the first class, I said, what is the strongest force in academia? It's not gravity. It's not electromagnetism. It's jealousy.
I would hope it's curiosity. That's what sucks.
That's what brought me into science.
Well, that's what you display.
And I'm naive. I don't change my reason for doing something just because other people misbehave. I feel like I'm attending a party where the attendees are misbehaving, and all I can hope for is for a guest to show up and change the situation. One reason I'm seeking intelligence in interstellar space is I don't often find it in academia.
Well, I think addressing it helps. I think what you're doing helps. I think these kind of conversations do help because I don't think a lot of people are aware of the kind of resistance that you face. And I know it's a lot of what you discuss, and I wish it was less.